Merce Cunningham died this past summer, and since I had already studied at his studio for years and years and was very familiar with his work, I wanted to pay tribute to him. And there was a previous Merce Cunningham poem, just like there was a previous poem about the shoreline, there was a previous Merce Cunningham poem. And so I wrote this one to sort of complement that one. And this Merce Cunningham event poem was actually based on not just his dying, but going to a concert of Merce Cunningham's choreography that was done about a week after he died on one of the big lawns at Battery Park City. So I was able to capture some of the little events that happened while we were watching the performance, and also some of the philosophy of Merce Cunningham's choreography in the poem.
Right. Okay. So you want to go? Here goes Austin with Merce Cunningham event.
Merce Cunningham event. Dance is ephemeral. Each step says as it disappears. These movements exist as fey flights of hummingbirds, dangling life of dragonflies, magnified, then erased. Simultaneous sequence, quick glitterings, shards of glass enjoying their fragmentation as an audience sifts through this elaborate puzzle, letting set pieces fall wonderfully out of place.
So I like how you kind of give the idea of dance. You end off with saying, can you repeat that last line that you say in the end of the poem?
Letting set pieces fall wonderfully out of place.
So it's kind of speaking of the body, which is set in motion, but the dance kind of gives an illusion that it immediately disappears. Can you go more into, I guess, speaking of the experience that obviously the Merce Cunningham event would give you, that choreography would?
Well, I do see his choreography as a kind of puzzle where things are sometimes fitting together, sometimes trying to fit together, not really narrative, more abstract, but at the same time, sometimes there's a little bit of narration in the piece that
Right.
is up to the audience to figure out. And sometimes things don't quite fit into place, and that's great because the asymmetrical quality is what he's after.
Right.
Because it's so much like life. Things are not perfect in life. Things are spontaneous, and they have their own beauty because they're spontaneous. So all of that was going into the poem. The whole idea of simultaneous sequence is because sometimes you will have two separate parts of the stage with two separate dances going on simultaneously, and the audience chooses which one to look at, which again is like life, where there might be two screens and you look at different screens in the same room. And things sometimes are very quick in his poem, in his choreography, very sharp and very fast. So I wanted to capture that, and I want to capture the fact that his choreography is sort of like shards of glass reflecting things, and you have to be really quick to catch it all.
Okay.
And you never catch it all, but that's part of the fun.
I wanted to bring, you brought up shards of glass. I like that because when I hear that, I think of, you know, how you have a gentle motion and then it's something that's hard hitting. Was that also an allusion to that of like hard-hitting movements or the difference of intensity in the choreography?
Yes, very much so. I
Okay.
mean, he works very much with contrast, sharp, soft, quick, slow, um, technically very difficult, and then sometimes some very ordinary everyday movement
Okay.
interspersed with a technical difficult movement.
Right.
So I was thinking about all of that. Mm, and also I was thinking of the fact that dance is very concrete in the sense
Right.
that it's right there in front of you, but at the same time it disappears and there's no record of it really, the
Right.
way there's a record of a painting that exists forever. A dance might exist in the moment and then not be there anymore.
Mm. And in this particular, when you speak of the shards of glass and everything like that, or just the different references you make in the poem about the idea of movement, your last point about movement and how dance is kind of in the moment. Even if you take a picture, the people who see the picture won't get the same effect that the people who are actually attending the show or the performance would. Is it this particular event that affected you with the choreography, or was it any kind of Merce Cunningham choreography that really had that impact on you, and this was just a sum of all of your experiences?
I think I was thinking of his work in general, that is always like that. Um, although the inspiration came from this particular concert, and
Right.
that's why I put in the dragonflies, because there really were dragonflies flying around us as we
Oh,
were sitting
wow.
on the lawn at Battery Park City watching the performance.
Right.
Um, but even dragonflies were a little bit like the choreography because they're there and then gone.
Right.
Um,
You see that parallel.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if you look at his work from 20 or 30 years ago, you would see the same things that I'm talking about right now.
Right.
So there was a definite vision of dance that he had that he stuck with throughout his entire life.
Right. So he had a consistency that pretty much no matter when you saw it, you would get some experience that you mentioned in the poem.
Yes.
Okay.
Which some people loved and some people didn't, but
Right.
it
You
didn't matter.
appreciate it. Right, right. It's like if you like his work, you like his work. All right. And we're going to go on into the Fallen Hero.
Can I just say first,
Yeah.
I love this guy's poetry.
Oh, yes.
It's very inspiring.
Definitely.
I'll read it first and then we'll talk.
Okay, perfect.
Fallen Hero. Railroad trestle across a ravine, ground far below each cross tie. Hand in daddy's, sure I won't fall. Gone fishing in plush green July, at first light when they bite best. He did not talk much about war, though the core coursed through him, like he through my every vein. It was the exact way he folded clothes in his 26-inch determined steps. I fished for each small detail, fingers over every closeted stitch of his press-ready uniform. Bobber dancing river waves, silver battle stars and ribbons. Now I hear his grown-up horrors through malt liquor haze and cigarettes. From his chair in the corner, where those who live learn night's lessons, not to be silhouetted by the moon, where rifles are cleaner than hands, and broken rigor mortis bodies freeze on glistening fields of changing snow, where burnt cordite thickens air as he slips between present ties, where I strain to hold him.
Okay, that's a heavy poem. It's beautiful. And you speaking of your father?
My father, who had
Okay.
been in the Marine Corps
Mhm.
during the Korean War, He actually, the Korean War was the first war where the troops were integrated, and he became a non-commissioned officer. So he was one of the first black men to actually command white troops
Oh,
as
wow.
well as black troops. He had been wounded in the war, and of course he had seen many people killed,
Right.
many of his friends killed. And even years later, it still affects him. I mean, this poem is like a moment in time. It doesn't affect him like that all the time, but even now, all these years, the Korean War was in the early 1950s and started in 1949. And all these years later, he still remembers. He obviously, as a soldier, had to kill men,
Right.
and he remembers each one.
Wow.
All these years later, remembers their faces. And I wrote this poem sort of in honor of him because he is a decorated soldier and had bravely served the country. But also because now with all the wars that we are fighting, we have so many people coming back now that have these kind of memories that no one should have to remember,
Right.
you know. And it's sort of a poem, I guess, against war, but also in honor of the people who have fought in the wars,
Right.
you know. But hopefully, as we think about these things in time, this won't be the way people settle their
Right.
differences,
Right.
you know.
I appreciate that you personalize the experience of the war, because you think about soldiers, you hear about the casualties, you hear about people coming home, and it's a celebration. But one thing that isn't commonly spoken about is their experience. They feel like some people have an issue with, you know, not being able to relate. You know, the family can't necessarily relate. They know that they've been through a lot and something that they haven't experienced. And you really go into that. Can you explain more when you say something about the present, keeping him in the present, like you were trying to, I guess, grasp an experience with your father, but you saw that he would slip into the two worlds of one of his past and one of kind of assimilating really back into society and what home is?
Right, right. I think that obviously as a boy, you know, you see the war movies and you're thinking, oh, this is great. You know, I want all these stories.
Right.
But then when the soldier sometimes really starts, first of all, my father didn't tell me the stories as a child. It's not something a child should hear.
Right.
But as an adult, some of the stories I've learned. And as he goes back into those stories, all you want to do is now pull him back to the present.
Right.
You don't want him to be caught up in that.
That experience
And
and
that-
emotion.
Yeah, because that emotion can be very painful and depressing for soldiers, even
Right.
years later sometimes.
Right.
You know.
And you said that he remembers each face of the soldier that he took, so it's kind of like you're doing what you have to do, but it's still that human emotion that these are lives you're taking and things like that. Right.
And when he came back from the war, he wouldn't even go hunting.
Yeah.
He was like, I've killed enough things in my lifetime. I don't need to kill anything else.
Wow. That's powerful. All right. So we're going to keep an eye out for work from Austin Alexis and John Manny Jr. This is Unknown Artists, and I want to thank you all so much for being here with us today. The phenomenal poets. Keep an eye out for both of them in their work.
Thank you.
Thank you.